From the outside, it never looked dramatic. There were no grand gestures meant to steal attention, no moments designed to dominate headlines. And yet, anyone who watched closely could feel it almost immediately. Something gentle, steady, and deeply reassuring existed between Becky and Freen. It showed up first in the smallest ways. A smile exchanged across a crowded room. A hand reaching out instinctively when the other looked unsure. A pause before speaking, as if checking silently whether the other was ready. These weren't moments that demanded applause. They were moments that felt lived in. And that's exactly why fans noticed. Becky and Freen never tried to define their bond publicly. They didn't label it, frame it, or sell it as something bigger than it was. Instead, they allowed it to reveal itself naturally through consistency rather than intensity. Over time, fans realized they weren't watching something loud or performative. They were witnessing quiet support in its purest form. In interviews, their dynamic felt different from most on-screen pairings. There was no pressure to entertain, no rush to interrupt. When one spoke, the other listened fully, not waiting for their turn but absorbing the moment. Even their silences felt comfortable, never awkward. That ease told its own story. What made their bond feel so special was how balanced it was. Becky brought warmth and openness, a natural emotional clarity that made people feel included. Freen carried calm strength, a grounded presence that steadied the space around her. Together, they didn't overpower one another, they complemented. Where one softened, the other anchored. Where one hesitated, the other waited. Fans began to describe their connection as safe. Safe to watch, safe to feel, safe to believe in. That reaction didn't come from a single viral moment. It grew slowly, accumulated through countless small interactions that added up to something meaningful. A reassuring glance during a difficult event. A quiet laugh shared off to the side when cameras weren't focused on them. The way they naturally stood closer without needing to be seen. Behind the scenes, this consistency mattered even more. People who worked with them noticed how attuned they were to each other's emotional states. If one was tired, the other adjusted. If one felt overwhelmed, the other stepped in, not with drama, but with presence. It wasn't about saving or spotlighting. It was about showing up. And showing up again and again builds trust. That trust translated seamlessly on screen. Their scenes didn't need exaggeration to feel emotional. Sometimes, it was just the way Freen's expression softened when Becky spoke, or the way Becky instinctively leaned toward Freen during quiet moments. Fans replayed these scenes not because they were explosive, but because they were believable. In a world where chemistry is often defined by sparks and intensity, Becky and Freen offered something different: steadiness. They showed that connection doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it settles in quietly and stays. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, reliable and sincere. As their journey continued, fans found themselves emotionally invested in a way that surprised them. Not excited in a dramatic sense, but comforted. Many said watching Becky and Freen felt like watching two people who genuinely had each other's backs, regardless of the situation. That feeling stayed long after episodes ended or events wrapped up. People talked about how rare it was to see support portrayed without competition. How refreshing it felt to watch two individuals succeed without needing to outshine one another. Becky and Freen didn't compete for space, they shared it. And that sharing made all the difference. Even when rumors surfaced, their response, or lack of one, spoke volumes. They didn't rush to clarify or deny. They didn't feed speculation. They simply continued being themselves, letting their actions remain consistent. That calm confidence reassured fans more than any statement ever could. Over time, their bond became a reference point. When fans talked about genuine connection, Becky and Freen's names came up. When people discussed comfort pairings, quiet strength, or emotional safety, they were mentioned naturally, without forcing the comparison. Because what made their bond special wasn't mystery or drama. It was reliability. They showed that care doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. That support doesn't need to be visible to be real. And that sometimes the strongest connections are built not in moments of attention, but in moments of quiet understanding. That's why fans keep watching. That's why the smiles feel meaningful. And that's why Becky and Freen's bond continues to resonate softly, steadily, and sincerely. As time went on, that quiet steadiness became even more noticeable. While trends shifted and attention moved from one headline to another, Becky and Freen remained the same with each other, consistent, calm, and grounded. Fans began to realize that what they were witnessing wasn't a phase or a moment shaped by circumstance, but a pattern built over time. And patterns are hard to fake. At public events, their connection showed up in subtle ways that cameras almost missed. Becky would instinctively slow her pace to match Freen's. Freen would position herself just slightly closer, not to be seen, but to be present. When questions were directed at one, the other listened attentively, nodding softly, offering silent reassurance. These gestures weren't rehearsed. They were habitual. Viewers noticed how naturally they protected each other's space. In crowded settings, Becky often became more aware of Freen's comfort, adjusting without drawing attention. Freen, in turn, anchored Becky with quiet confidence, offering stability when the noise around them grew louder. There was no visible tension, no need for control, just mutual awareness. That awareness deepened their on-screen work as well. Scenes between them gained emotional clarity without added intensity. There was no rush to heighten drama. Instead, emotions unfolded gradually, allowing viewers to feel rather than be told what to feel. Fans described watching them as exhaling, as if their presence alone slowed everything down. What truly set their bond apart was how it never demanded interpretation. They didn't tease the audience. They didn't blur lines for attention. They didn't perform closeness. They simply existed as they were, and that authenticity made people protective rather than possessive. Fans didn't clamor for explanations. Instead, they hoped nothing would disturb what felt genuine. That reaction was telling. In online discussions, people often compared Becky and Freen to friendships and partnerships in their own lives, the ones built on understanding rather than excitement. Many said watching them reminded them of the kind of support that doesn't disappear when things get difficult. The kind that stays quietly, without asking for credit. That sense of emotional safety became their signature. Even when schedules grew demanding and pressures increased, there was no visible strain between them. If anything, they seemed to rely on each other more, not by leaning heavily, but by staying steady. It was the kind of balance that allows both people to grow without fear of being left behind. Industry insiders subtly acknowledged it too. Comments surfaced about how easy it was to work with them together, how communication was smooth, how scenes rarely needed heavy adjustment, not because they were predictable, but because they trusted the process and each other. Trust simplifies everything. And perhaps that's why fans began to see their bond as something rare rather than dramatic. Rare in its normalcy, rare in its lack of spectacle, rare in how little it asked from the audience while giving so much in return. As the years passed, Becky and Freen didn't become louder. They became clearer. Clear in their respect. Clear in their consistency. Clear in the way they showed up again and again without needing recognition. That clarity is what keeps people watching. Not to search for hidden meanings. Not to catch slips or secrets. But to witness a connection that feels steady in a world that often isn't. In the end, what makes Becky and Freen's bond feel so special isn't a single moment or a viral clip. It's the accumulation of quiet choices. Choosing patience over performance. Choosing presence over attention. Choosing each other's comfort without needing to explain why. And that's why, no matter how much time passes, their soft smiles and quiet support continue to resonate, because they remind people that the most meaningful connections don't shout. They stay. As more time passed, fans began to notice something even deeper. Becky and Freen's bond didn't just remain steady, it matured. It evolved in a way that felt natural, almost invisible, but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. What once appeared as gentle support slowly revealed itself as something rooted in deep understanding. They had learned each other's rhythms. Becky could sense when Freen needed encouragement without a word being spoken. Freen, in turn, seemed to know exactly when Becky needed grounding, offering it quietly, without drawing attention. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious, but it was constant. And constancy builds a kind of closeness that doesn't rely on emotion alone, it relies on trust. Fans often pointed out how their interactions felt unguarded. There was no stiffness, no calculation. Even in front of cameras, there was a sense that neither felt the need to perform for the other. Smiles came easily. Laughter didn't feel forced. And moments of seriousness were met with patience rather than discomfort. That emotional ease made people feel like they were witnessing something sincere rather than staged. What made this especially meaningful was how rare it felt in the public eye. So often, relationships under constant observation become exaggerated or defensive. Becky and Freen seemed to do the opposite. The more visible they became, the quieter their bond grew, as if they had learned that the strongest way to protect something precious was not to explain it. This quiet strength showed itself during difficult moments too. When pressure mounted, whether from demanding schedules, public expectations, or sudden attention, neither appeared to withdraw. Instead, they stayed close in the ways that mattered. A reassuring presence nearby, a calm glance, a shared understanding that didn't need reassurance out loud. Fans noticed how this steadiness affected them emotionally. Many said watching Becky and Freen helped them slow down, that their interactions felt grounding, almost therapeutic. In a world that often rewards excess and urgency, their calm connection felt like permission to breathe. It also changed how fans viewed success. Instead of celebrating only achievements or milestones, people began appreciating how Becky and Freen navigated challenges together, how they respected boundaries, how they allowed space for individuality while still showing up for one another. Their bond didn't demand sameness, it honored difference. That balance resonated deeply. As conversations continued online, the tone remained remarkably gentle. There was little hostility, little pressure for answers. Fans seemed content simply observing, appreciating what was visible and respecting what wasn't. That kind of audience response is rare, and it speaks volumes about the trust Becky and Freen inspired. Over time, their connection became something fans pointed to when discussing emotional maturity. Not love defined by intensity, not closeness defined by constant presence, but care defined by consistency. And perhaps that's the most enduring part of their story. Becky and Freen didn't create moments designed to be remembered. They created an environment where sincerity could exist without fear, where support didn't need to be proven, where being present was enough. That's why their bond continues to feel special, not because it asks for attention, but because it never does. It remains steady when things are loud. It remains gentle when things are uncertain. It remains real when so much else feels curated. And in that quiet, unwavering presence, fans find something rare and comforting, proof that the strongest connections don't have to be dramatic to be deeply felt.